Hey everybody, let's talk about variant collecting and buying multiple copies of the same album. Stick around and we'll dive in. Hey everyone. So there's been a number of videos recently here on YouTube talking about variant collecting and the multiple variants that are floating around these days, and the practice of pressing different types of colored variants and limited records, and number of channels, too many records talked about this. Channel 33 RPM talked about this. I think Melinda Murphy did a video about this. It's been a topic that's been covered a lot recently. I just thought I'd kind of give my take of this. First and foremost, we're not going to talk about accidentally buying multiple copies of the same album. That's for any of us that have been buying records for any amount of time. You know the drill. You forget to update your Discogs account, and then you see something you think you like, and then you buy it and you get it home and you put it on the shelf right next to the one you already had. That's not what we're going to talk about. But I was going to give you my take of, the thought process for me when I'm looking at some of these variants, as well as just in general buying an album multiple times. First off, when it comes to variants, when there's a new release coming out, if they're, if it's just standard black, I'm obviously just going to buy standard black. If there's a cool variant out there, I'll look at the variant, and if I think it's worth the money, I'll get it. I think, it's cool. I have had pretty good luck buying colored vinyl. I know some folks will swear by black sounding better, and others say it doesn't matter. With my setup that I have, I've generally had very good luck. I've had some bad pressings on black, and I've had some really great pressings on colored vinyl. So it's really a crapshoot, to be honest with you. A lot of stores now, a lot of the indie stores get those indie exclusives, and since I obviously prefer to support my indie record store, if they've got a really cool indie exclusive, I'll go after that. I'm certainly not going to fault anyone for doing variants if it's getting people interested in buying records and getting people into shops and spending money on physical media. More power to the artists and helping them make some money. Taylor Swift, it felt like she had 20 different variations of the CD and the album and some of the singles that she put out this summer that still aren't even all available yet because they were all pre-orders. That's... It is what it is, and you can either choose to buy them or not. But I'm not somebody that's going to go out and, generally speaking, buy like multiple copies of the same album, with one, I guess, notable exception. So I just thought in general I would show some of the albums I have that I have multiple copies of, because I think there's another aspect of this too. It's not just collecting maybe a variant of an album that comes out immediately, but there's also that decision-making process as to, I already have an album, do I buy it again, and what's the reason? So the most obvious reason for me to buy an album a second time is an upgrade. So one notable situation is Harvest from Neil Young. I bought this, 5-6 years ago. It was around the time where I was kind of getting into Neil. Like, I've always liked Neil Young, but for a while, he's got such a vast catalog. I kind of felt intimidated as to, like, what do I get into? Do I get into his early stuff? Should I snatch up some of these newer releases? Do I go, just for the stuff with Crazy Horse, or do I start at Buffalo Springs, or what? It's all over the place. And eventually I ended up just saying, let me just go back to the beginning and some of the stuff that I was most familiar with. So I picked up this, as I said, 5-6 years ago. You can see there's a little bit of a water stain on it. Some of the sleeves that he used early on did not hold up well on a number of albums. I think I paid $5 for this at the time. It was a really inexpensive record. It plays pretty clean. It sounds good. But I figured at some point I would probably get an upgrade. Neil's been remastering a lot of and repressing a lot of his early stuff over the years, and I kept hearing how good of a pressing the repressing was, and it's the quality. And I've read some reviews of people saying that this repressing might actually be better than the original. It's typically a little bit pricey. It's like $30 plus, 30, 35. I stumbled on a copy and it was like $18. And it's been kind of like in and out of print or just, difficult to find at times recently. So when I saw it recently, I picked it up. It sounds great. It sounds amazing. And honestly, at this point, I'm probably going to just go ahead and replace this one. This will probably go into the pile of records that I'll look to sell at some point down the road. I really don't need to keep 2 copies of this. I'm really pleased with the repressing. Another situation that came up, I guess, recently was I picked up this copy of Back to the Future soundtrack. I had this on cassette as a kid. Love the soundtrack. Some really good songs on this too. Not, obviously you get the couple of Huey Lewis songs that were really notable in the soundtrack, but there's also a Lindsey Buckingham song and an Eric Clapton song that were basically unreleased tracks that were at the time only available on the soundtrack. This soundtrack is tough to find. This is actually a promo copy that I found not too long ago. But even though it is a promo copy, it was not well taken care of, and it's got some scratches in a few notable places, so it's not the most enjoyable record to listen to. But I still really liked it. This summer, Mondo did a repressing, and it was a tri-colored album. They updated the artwork. Sounds really good. So this was a case where I bought another copy. Not sure yet what I'm going to do with this one. I might keep it because it's got the original album artwork, but just not use it necessarily as my playing copy. But I might end up just going ahead and put this in the to sell pile too, because do I need to have 2 copies of this? Maybe not. It's something I'll have to make a decision on at some point. So sometimes you get you buy that one because there's maybe multiple variations, and you go out and buy it, and then you realize you could have gotten a different one. So an example is a number of years ago I was looking for the Postal Service. I knew that they had obviously their lone album, but I also knew that they had kind of an anniversary edition that had the album and then a few extra LPs of their singles and B-sides. It wasn't one that I was really going out of my way to track down. I figured, I'd like to get the album. I would like to get the deluxe edition, but I'm not going to go to the end of the earth to try to track it down. So at some point, I saw this in a shop. It had a good price on it, so I picked it up. And then not long after that, I, of course, saw the deluxe edition of it. So, I've got the 2 copies. This is the one I listened to. This I already moved into the to-sell pile. I don't really have any intention to keep them both. There's just no reason for that. So, hopefully at some point I'll find a good home for this for somebody else, and then I will keep the deluxe edition for myself. So another situation where I might have additional copies is kind of the different album artwork scenario. So I mentioned it a little bit with the Back to the Future, but Another one that I do have two copies of, and right now I plan to keep them both, is the Strokes. With their first album, Is This It? So, not going to go into the whole story, but the original artwork as intended was this, which is a little bit racy. And the other one is the Americanized or North American version of it that's a little bit more tame. I had this one first, I bought it. And then at some point after that, Music on Vinyl put out a little bit more of an audiophile level pressing of it on the original artwork. Sounds really good. Both copies sound good. It's the same track listing, but the Strokes are one of my favorite bands, and I think, like, for me, I like the idea of keeping the two copies with the two different album covers. Another situation where I might hang on to two copies and buy multiple copies is the remastered or the expanded edition, and I've got a few of these, and one in particular is MTV Unplugged from Nirvana. One of my favorite albums of all time. Love Nirvana, but the MTV performance is just outstanding. Bought the MTV Unplugged a number of years ago, and then in the last year or two, they ended up putting out an expanded edition. They kind of polished up the cover a little bit, added a little, like, almost foil around it, but they expanded it onto 2 discs with they gave the tracks a little bit of room to breathe, going on to a second LP, and then they used the 4th side to put a few of the rehearsal tracks on it. So it's a little bit of an expanded edition. Not sure what I'm going to do yet. I feel like this one too, I did buy, this is black, and then this one is a colored variant. So I might keep them both, or at some point, if I do sell one, I'll sell the slimmed down original version, and then just keep the expanded version for myself. Along the lines of Nirvana, with that expanded edition, is another similar example, which is Boney Bear's Blood Bank. This EP came out about 10 years back. 2 songs on each side, really good. Love Boney Bear. Living in Wisconsin, it's kind of it feels necessary to own as much of the stuff that Justin Vernon puts out. And I love his music, not just with Boney Bear, but his other projects that he does. So had this one for a while, but just in this past year, he put out an anniversary edition. So this is a case too where you've got different album artwork. So kind of in that case, I feel like I'm going to keep them both. This anniversary edition, it's on red vinyl versus this one is on black. And then additionally, this is obviously the 4 songs, but with the anniversary edition, he expanded it to 8 songs. So it's the 4 songs from this all on side A, and then live versions of those 4 songs on side B. So again, here's a situation where I'll probably just keep these both because they're in my mind different. All right, and then the last situation is the collector in me. So in most cases, I'm just buying music because I want to get a copy of an album that I love, or I'm into, or an artist I'm into, and I don't necessarily do it as a collector. It's more of a music listener. But when it comes to Bruce Springsteen, I'm a collector. Grew up in New Jersey, huge Springsteen fan. I've got all of his albums on CDs and cassettes and vinyl in multiple copies in a lot of cases, and bootlegs and live recordings and so on and so forth. So with Bruce, I've got a pretty extensive collection. And in a few cases, I've got multiple copies, and I'll kind of explain a little bit there. So with like, you take Born to Run, I have an original, from mid 70s. I don't know if it's a first pressing or if it's not a first pressing, because they corrected the spelling of John Landau's producer's name on it, but it's an early pressing. It's pretty yellowed at this point. Bought a whole bunch of used records when I first got back into vinyl about 20 years ago, and bought a pretty large Springsteen collection. I actually have, I think, 3 copies of Born to Run on vinyl. So I have this one. I have a box set of repressed albums from 5-10 years ago that I picked up, and then I also, not too long ago, bought this version, part of Columbia's Half Speed Master series. Supposed to be similar to kind of like a Mobile Fidelity. It's like their attempt at doing the Mobile Fidelity thing. It definitely, the quality isn't as good as a MoFi pressing, but it's a nice, really clean pressing. And just as a Springsteen collector, felt like I wanted to get different pressings to see which ones I liked, and really don't have any intention on selling any of those copies. And as I said, I have another copy that's basically brand new, in the Springsteen collection box set, that has all of his early albums from Greetings up through Born in the USA. So I've got multiple copies of all of those albums. And then lastly, again, as a Springsteen collector, as a big fan of Springsteen, is that rare moment as a variant collector. It's not something I would normally do. Usually, as I said, if multiple variants are out, I'll pick one and just roll with it. Unless it's a repressing or one of those examples that I gave earlier. With Bruce, if he's putting out 3 different variants, I'm gonna try and buy them all. I've got a few different examples of this. Like, I've got an original pressing of his greatest hits album from the 90s, and then I have a record store day version on red vinyl from a few years ago. I have a few others in kind of variants. One extreme that I do have, I'm not going to pull them all out, but I can kind of give you a sense of what I have, is I've got 4 different copies of his last album, his last studio album, Western Stars. And I do, with his upcoming album, have a few different copies on order too. So I ended up, I think, first got one copy. It's like the Barnes & Noble exclusive that was on kind of like a clear and blue splattered, it's almost like cloud-like to kind of match the album artwork. So I bought that copy. I've got a copy which is on, I think this is this is the black version. It's still in the shrink. I think I sliced it open to listen to it, to just pull them out, but I otherwise left that one in the shrink. And then his web store had a couple copies, so I ended up getting his online store was selling a deep blue colored one, which he put it out, and there were production delays and shipping delays, and Columbia, his label, or Sony, ended up refunding everybody their money. So I ended up getting this for free, and it was not cheap either. It was, it was a premium for buying it from his store. And then the European version of his online store had a light blue. So there was a dark blue for the US market, and then they sold a light blue, which kind of matched better, I think, the cover. And in typical European fashion, they put it in a really nice, it's that heavy-duty plastic that they use, which I really liked. I like the packaging on this one a lot. But I was able to track this one down and got it at a pretty good price. I think from England. I bought it, I think, off of Discogs. So it's again, not something I would normally do. You know, I guess if I was a Taylor Swift fan, I probably would have tried to buy every variant she was putting out. Yeah, I'm certainly not going to criticize it as somebody that bought 4 different copies of Western Stars. But, you know, so I can understand from a collector's standpoint wanting to buy multiple copies. I'm certainly not going to criticize anyone, but it's not something I would normally do for really anybody else. So, you know, in a case of Bruce, as a collector, I'm going to try to get many different copies when there's different types of copies and CDs and whatnot. You know, but for anyone else, I'm generally just going to hone in on one and then kind of roll with that one. So let me know in the comments below, you know, what is your collecting method? Do you buy different variations? Do you buy multiple copies of the same album, whether it's just to collect or you know, out in that hunt to try to find the best sounding version and then ultimately sell off other ones? Let me know how you manage your collection and your collecting, and hopefully subscribe to this channel and give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk more soon. Thanks.